Destiny as a game has a lot of layers to it that, as a newcomer or returning player, can really overwhelm some people. But once you're able to break through that barrier, it becomes one of the most fun and rewarding things about the game entirely. Starting with the launch of Witch Queen back in February and continuing with each season since, Bungie has slowly been reworking all of the old light subclasses to the new and improved Aspect and Fragment system. This has included brand new abilities, status effects, buffs, nerfs, and a plethora of other things introduced, and now they are finally all available. So, I figured what better time to create an introductory guide to each of them, starting with the recently introduced ARC 3.0. This is going to serve less as a complete guide to every class and more of a general overview of ARC 3.0, explaining the fundamentals of how things work so that you can better understand it moving forward. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so, every subclass in Destiny 2 has its own flavor or personality, as I like to call it. This represents what the class is about, what it specializes in, and what you hope to gain from using it. In the case of ARC, it's speed, pure, unadulterated speed. From the movement of your character to your weapons and abilities themselves, ARC as a subclass is all about aggression, calling down lightning, moving forward without stopping or stopping as little as possible, chaining damage between enemies. You kinda get the idea. So let's get into the more nitty-gritty detail on how all this works. The 3.0 subclass system as a whole is built upon three fundamental pillars: Verbs, Aspects, and Fragments. Let's start with Verbs. Verbs, as Bungie calls them, are what gives a subclass its core identity. In the subclass menu, you can see them represented as the words that are highlighted, and ARC has 4 of these verbs: Amplify, Jolt, Blind, and Ionic Trace. These are 4 different status effects that you get while playing the subclass in different ways, and they can interact with each other in some instances. Amplify is the most common verb in your kit. The most basic way to activate this buff is to get rapid kills with arc damage from literally any source. Guns, abilities, it does not matter. Now, as for what it does, is a couple of things. First, being amplified makes you move faster and handle weapons faster until the timer expires. Second, if you sprint for a short time while amplified, you'll get a secondary buff called Speed Booster, which further increases your movement speed and the distance and speed at which you slide for as long as you keep moving. If you stop to shoot your gun for too long, you lose the Speed Booster buff. Additionally, you can continuously refresh the Amplify buff for as long as you keep getting arc kills or activating it from other sources. And that's kind of all there is to Amplify. You get kills, and those kills make you move fast. It's pretty simple. Moving on to our second verb, Jolt. Jolt is a special one because it's more of a debuff that you apply to enemies rather than a buff that you apply to yourself. Here's how it works. First, you use an ability to apply Jolt to a target. In this case, the Warlock's Chain Lightning melee will do it for us, but many things can apply Jolt. When the enemy is jolted, they will suffer a debuff for roughly 7 seconds. If you deal extra damage to them during this window, they will Chain Lightning to other enemies around them. If there are no enemies around them, they will chain the extra damage to themselves. Blind as a verb is pretty straightforward. If you've ever been flashbanged in Call of Duty, it's the exact same here. In PvE, Blind causes enemies to become disoriented for a short time, and they are unable to shoot you during this. In PvP, on the other hand, Blind causes other players' HUDs to disappear, and their screen becomes rather blurry. That's all that Blind does. It's decent for crowd control. As for our fourth and final verb, Ionic Traces are one of the more interesting parts of the ARC 3.0 kit. There are a few different ways to generate Ionic Traces, but when you do, a small wave of arc energy will spawn in the ground and travel towards you. If you run into it and collect it, you will gain ability energy. And that about wraps up the basics of the verb system for ARC 3.0. You can take these concepts and apply them to understanding Solar Void and Stasis as well. Now, let's move on to our second pillar, Aspects. Okay, so Aspects are fun. Aspects are what makes the classes unique between Warlock, Hunter, and Titan, and what gives you the primary structure of your abilities and build. For ARC, there are currently only 3 aspects in the game for each class, so 3 unique aspects for Warlock, 3 for Hunter, and 3 for Titan, and you can only equip 2 at a time. Now, what do these aspects do? Well, for the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to give an example of one aspect for each class. One of the Warlock aspects, Arc Soul, makes it so that anytime you cast your Rift, you will gain access to an Arc Buddy, which is a little ball of arc energy that automatically shoots enemies by your side. Additionally, any allies who stand in your Rift will also gain their own Arc Buddy, and being amplified during this upgrades the Arc Buddy to shoot more often. One of the Titan aspects, Touch of Thunder, provides enhanced effects for 4 specific arc grenades. Flashbang grenades emit an additional flash on bounce. Pulse grenades emit ionic traces as they damage enemies over time, and the damage itself also increases over time. Lightning grenades provide a second grenade charge and jolts enemies that are hit by the initial detonation, and storm grenades summon a roaming thundercloud that tracks enemies after the explosion that shoots lightning bolts and enemies underneath the cloud. Lastly, one of the hunter aspects, Lethal Current, after dodging. Lethal Current buffs your next melee attack with increased range, which jolts the target and then creates a damaging aftershock. Additionally, damaging any jolted enemy with a melee attack will also blind them. As I hopefully just explained well, aspects provide the core abilities of your kit, how it works and interacts with each other, and what you can or can't do, your primary abilities if you will. These aspects also lead directly into our last pillar, Fragments. So you may have noticed a little something in parts of my footage, or just browsing the menus yourself in-game. All aspects have anywhere from 1 to 3 fragment slots. The stronger the aspect, the less fragment slots it has. However, most aspects generally have 2 fragment slots with a few exceptions. The amount of fragment slots you have with both of your equipped aspects determines, you guessed it, how many fragments you can use. Now, what are fragments specifically? Fragments are small little augments that you can apply to your already existing kit to give it some more versatility or flavor. For example, the Spark of Faults fragment makes you amplified every single time you get a finisher kill on an enemy, and gives you a bonus to your recovery stat. That's it. That's all it does. Some fragments may buff your stats, and some may even take away a stat total from you, usually if it's a stronger fragment, such as Spark of Shock, which causes your grenades to jolt targets, but also lowers your discipline stat. There's no right or wrong answer to which fragments you end up using, so experiment. See what you like and what sort of combos you can create with all of your abilities. Okay, so a few other small things to note about Arc 3.0. You can also choose between different supers, class abilities, jumps, melee abilities, and grenades. My advice is to just try them all and see what you like. They're pretty self-explanatory just by reading them, so I'm not going to go over them here in depth, but try and familiarize yourself with everything in your kit. While your super, melee, jump, and class ability are unique to the 3 classes, Warlock, Hunter, and Titan respectively, every class has access to all available grenades. I hope I have been able to provide an adequate but easy to understand introduction to the Subclass 3.0 environment, and I hope you were able to find some use out of this video. If you want to see more and my mental state decides to cooperate, leave a comment below, subscribe, literally anything, like, dislike, I don't care. It motivates me to do more. But with that being said, my name is Yami, and I will see you beautiful people next time.